There are moments, rare, unrepeatable moments, when something inside you pauses without warning. You could be scrolling, distracted, moving through your routine like any other day, and suddenly, something shifts. A stillness. A quiet but undeniable voice that says, "Stop. Pay attention. This is for you." And you don't even know why, but you feel it deep in your chest, like something ancient just recognized your name. This is one of those moments. You didn't land here randomly. You didn't stumble onto this message by accident. No, something guided you here. Something beyond logic, beyond coincidence, beyond timing as you understand it. Because when heaven decides it is time for truth to surface, it does not ask for permission. It creates alignment. It orchestrates moments. It interrupts your normal just enough to open a door you didn't even realize was there. And right now that door is opening. There has been something lingering in your life, something you couldn't quite name. Maybe it felt like a pattern you couldn't break. Maybe it showed up as a memory that returns at the strangest times. Or maybe it's been a feeling, a quiet discomfort, like there's a piece of your story that never fully made sense. You tried to move forward. You tried to let it go. You told yourself it didn't matter anymore. But it does. And that's why this moment is happening now. Because there is a truth, hidden, buried, delayed, that is beginning to rise again. Not to hurt you, but to awaken you. Not to trap you in the past, but to free your future. And Archangel Michael stands at the center of this divine interruption, not as a distant figure, but as a present force, a protector, a revealer, a voice cutting through the noise that has surrounded you for far too long. He is not whispering gently this time. He's calling you to attention. Because what is resurfacing is not small. It is not random. It is not something you can ignore again without consequence. It is connected to the way you see yourself, the way you trust, the way you move forward from this point on. And if misunderstood, it could keep you circling the same cycles. But if understood, truly understood, it will shift everything. Think about it. Have you noticed how certain memories have been coming back lately? Have you felt emotions rise that you thought were long gone? Have you questioned decisions, relationships, or moments from your past that once felt closed? That is not regression. That is revelation. Something is being uncovered because you are finally ready to see it. Not as you saw it before, but with clarity, with maturity, with spiritual awareness you didn't have back then. And that is why the timing feels so intense, because the truth is not just returning, it is returning with purpose. But here is where you must be careful, because not every resurfacing truth feels comfortable. Some of it will challenge what you believed. Some of it will expose things you overlooked. Some of it may even shake the identity you've built around certain experiences. And that is exactly why so many people miss their moment. They retreat when truth begins to rise. You cannot retreat this time. This is your interruption. This is your awakening. This is your moment of alignment. And the question is no longer, why is this happening? The real question is, are you ready to see what you were once unable to see? Because once you do, you cannot go back to who you were before this moment. Something has already begun. And it's not going to wait for you to catch up. Type "I am ready for truth" in the comments if you feel this message stirring your spirit. Blessing code 1010 is now activated around you. There is a reason you have not been at peace lately, and no, it is not because something is wrong with you. It is because something is waking up within you. A stirring, subtle at first, almost easy to dismiss, but persistent enough that it refuses to disappear. You have felt it in quiet moments when your mind should have been calm, yet something kept circling back. You have noticed it in conversations that seemed ordinary on the surface, but left you with a strange afterthought you could not shake. You have experienced it in flashes of memory, emotions rising without warning, questions forming without clear answers. This is not confusion. This is activation. Archangel Michael reveals that these internal movements are not random disruptions. They are signals. They are fragments of a deeper truth attempting to reach your conscious awareness. But here is what has been happening. You have been trained, over time, to ignore these signals. You have learned to rationalize them away, to tell yourself that you are overthinking, that you are being too sensitive, that it is better to move on than to look back. And so, every time the stirring began, you quieted it. Every time clarity tried to rise, you replaced it with distraction. Every time your spirit whispered, you allowed the noise of the world to drown it out. But now, it is becoming louder. You may have noticed how certain patterns have started repeating themselves in ways that feel almost intentional. The same type of situation, the same emotional reaction, the same kind of person triggering the same response within you. It feels familiar, almost too familiar, as if life is presenting you with the same lesson again, but this time with greater intensity. That is not coincidence. That is a cycle demanding to be broken. And cycles do not break through avoidance. They break through awareness. There have also been moments recently where your intuition has sharpened without explanation. You sense things before they happen. You read between words that others speak casually. You feel energy shifts in environments that once felt normal. This heightened awareness is not something new being added to you. It is something old being reawakened. It has always been within you, but it was buried under layers of doubt, conditioning, and past interpretations that kept you from trusting it fully. Now, as the hidden truth begins to rise, your perception is being restored alongside it. Think carefully about the last few weeks, or even days. How many times have you paused and questioned something you would have previously accepted without hesitation? How many times have you felt a quiet resistance inside you when faced with something that once felt comfortable? That resistance is not fear. It is discernment. It is your spirit recognizing misalignment before your mind can fully process it. And yet, there is a part of you that still tries to override it, to maintain normalcy, to avoid disruption. That internal conflict you feel is the tension between who you were and who you are becoming. There is also the emotional layer, the one that feels the most overwhelming. Emotions that seem to come from nowhere, tied to memories you thought had lost their power. You may find yourself revisiting moments from your past with a different perspective, noticing details you missed before, questioning narratives you once accepted as truth. This is not regression into old pain. This is reevaluation. It is the process of seeing your past through a lens of clarity rather than survival. Before, you processed experiences based on what you needed to endure them. Now, you are being invited to understand them based on what actually happened. This is why it feels intense. Because recognizing the signs means admitting that something was overlooked, misunderstood, or even hidden from you. And the human instinct is to resist that realization, to protect the version of reality that feels stable. But stability built on incomplete truth cannot sustain where you are going. That is why this stirring cannot be silenced anymore. It is not here to disturb your peace. It is here to redefine it. You are being called to pay attention, not selectively but fully. To observe without immediately judging. To feel without immediately suppressing. To question without immediately dismissing. The signs are not vague. They are precise, repeating, and increasingly impossible to ignore. Every moment of discomfort, every flash of memory, every intuitive nudge is part of a larger pattern revealing itself piece by piece. And here is what you must understand above all: the more you ignore the stirring, the stronger it becomes. Because truth does not disappear when avoided. It waits, it builds, and eventually, it demands to be seen. You are at the point where it is no longer asking gently. It is insisting. This is your moment to recognize it, to stop pushing it aside, to allow it to lead you where it has been trying to take you all along. Because what you are sensing is not uncertainty. It is direction. And once you acknowledge it, you will begin to see that everything you thought was random was actually connected. Type ISE the signs clearly in the comments if this is resonating with you. Blessing code 2020 is now surrounding your awareness. There comes a moment in every awakening when the truth no longer waits quietly beneath the surface. It begins to rise. Not gently, not subtly, but with a presence that demands to be acknowledged. And you are standing in that moment now. What was once hidden is no longer content to remain buried. What was once blurred is now sharpening into focus. And what you are beginning to see may not match what you once believed. Archangel Michael speaks with unmistakable authority in this phase, because this is where everything begins to shift. This is not just about awareness anymore. This is about revelation. The kind of revelation that rearranges your understanding of your own story. The kind that forces you to revisit moments you thought were resolved, conversations you thought were insignificant, and decisions you believed were fully yours. The hidden truth does not arrive all at once. It unfolds, piece by piece, layer by layer. At first, it may feel like small realizations, subtle shifts in perspective that make you pause and think, wait, that's not how I remember it. And then, as you sit with it longer, as you allow your mind to move beyond old explanations, something deeper begins to emerge. Patterns connect, details align, and suddenly, what once felt isolated begins to form a larger picture. This is where it becomes uncomfortable, because the truth that is surfacing is not just external, it is internal. It is not only about what happened around you, but about how it shaped you, how it influenced your choices, your boundaries, your reactions, your sense of identity. You begin to realize that certain beliefs you've carried were not entirely your own, that some of the ways you adapted were responses to something you didn't fully understand at the time. And this realization can feel destabilizing. You may question yourself. You may wonder how you missed it. You may even feel resistance, a pull to return to the simpler version of events that felt easier to hold on to. But understand this clearly. The discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is being corrected. The truth has always existed. What is changing now is your ability to see it. There are moments from your past that were incomplete, not because they lacked importance, but because you lacked the full perspective to interpret them accurately. You saw what you could see at the time. You understood what you were capable of understanding. But now, you are no longer that same version of yourself. Your awareness has expanded. Your perception has deepened. And because of that, the same moments are revealing something entirely different. You might begin to recognize that what you once labeled as coincidence was actually intentional. That what you dismissed as minor carried deeper meaning. That what you accepted without question deserved to be questioned. And as these realizations stack upon each other, the hidden truth begins to take form. But here is where you must remain grounded. Because when truth surfaces, it does not just bring clarity. It also brings the temptation to react, to confront immediately, to write everything at once, to feel the urgency to do something with what you are discovering. But this stage is not about reaction. It is about recognition. You are not being shown this truth to rush into action. You are being shown this truth so you can finally understand. There is power in allowing the truth to fully reveal itself before deciding what it means for your future. There is strength in observing without rushing to conclusions. Because what is surfacing now is only the beginning. There are layers you have not yet seen, connections you have not yet made, and if you move too quickly, you risk misinterpreting something that requires patience to fully unfold. Stay still in this moment. Let the truth speak. Let it expand. Let it challenge what you thought you knew. Because the more you allow it to rise without resistance, the clearer it becomes. And clarity is what will guide your next steps. Not emotion, not assumption, not fear, but clarity. You are not losing your understanding. You are refining it. And as this hidden truth continues to surface, you will begin to see that it was never meant to stay hidden forever. It was waiting for you to become ready enough to receive it without breaking under its weight. And now you are ready. Type "I accept the truth" in the comments if you are ready to see clearly. Blessing code 3030 is now activating deeper clarity within you. As this truth begins to surface, understand this: every revelation you are receiving is not meant to stay with you alone. There are others, just like you, standing on the edge of their own awakening, waiting for a message that will finally open their eyes. And in this very moment, you have the power to become part of that divine flow. When you choose to support this mission through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are not just giving. You are sowing light into someone else's darkness, planting seeds of truth that heaven will multiply beyond what you can see. The word declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And this is not just a promise. It is a living exchange unfolding right now. I feel led to say this clearly. Your action in this moment is not small. It is prophetic. It opens doors. It releases provision. It aligns you with the very truth you are receiving. So do not hesitate. Step into this moment. Sow with intention. And watch how heaven responds to your obedience. There is something you must understand now. Something that may shift the way you view everything that has come before this moment. Your past was never silent. It never disappeared. It never truly settled into the distance the way you believed it did. It has been present this entire time, not loudly, not forcefully, but patiently waiting. Waiting for the moment when you would be ready to hear what it has been trying to say all along. Archangel Michael reveals this with clarity, because one of the greatest illusions you have lived under is the belief that time alone resolves everything. You were taught, directly or indirectly, that moving on meant leaving things behind, that distance equaled closure, that silence meant completion. And so you moved forward. You adapted. You built your life on what you understood, believing that whatever was behind you had no more influence over who you were becoming. But that was never fully true. What actually happened is this. You learned how to function beyond certain moments, but you did not fully understand them. You learned how to carry yourself past certain experiences, but you did not fully process them. You learned how to survive what occurred, but survival is not the same as clarity. And so, the past did not disappear, it simply stepped back, waiting for the version of you that could finally see it without distortion. That version of you is who you are now. This is why the resurfacing feels so precise. It is not random memory. It is not emotional relapse. It is a carefully timed unveiling. The past is not returning to pull you backward. It is returning because it was never fully revealed to you in the first place. There were details you could not comprehend then. There were dynamics you could not recognize then. There were truths that, had you seen them earlier, might have overwhelmed you or altered your path in ways you were not prepared to handle. So they remained hidden, not erased, not removed, but held in suspension. And now, they are being released. You may begin to notice how certain moments from your past are no longer appearing as they once did. The emotional weight may feel different. The interpretation may shift. You may find yourself saying, "That's not what I thought it was," or "There's more to this than I realized." And that is because you are no longer viewing these memories through the lens of who you were at the time. You are seeing them through the lens of who you have become. And that changes everything. Because what once felt normal may now feel questionable. What once felt justified may now feel incomplete. What once felt resolved may now feel open again, not because it was undone, but because it was never fully understood. The silence you thought existed was not absence. It was concealment, not from you in a harmful way, but from you until the right moment arrived. And that moment is now. There is also something deeper happening beneath the surface. As these truths begin to emerge, you may feel a subtle shift in your sense of identity. Not dramatic, not immediate, but noticeable enough that you begin to question certain assumptions you held about yourself. Why did I react that way back then? Why did I accept that as normal? Why did I not see what seems so obvious now? These are not questions of regret. They are questions of awakening. Because understanding your past is not about judging your former self. It is about recognizing the conditions under which that version of you existed. You interpreted events based on the awareness you had. You made decisions within the limits of your perception. And now, those limits are being lifted. The veil that once filtered your understanding is thinning, and what was once muted is becoming clear. But here is where many people make a critical mistake. They try to silence the past again. They feel the discomfort of new understanding, and instead of leaning into it, they retreat. They tell themselves it does not matter anymore. They convince themselves that revisiting it is unnecessary. They rush to protect their current stability rather than allow deeper truth to reshape it. And in doing so, they miss the very reason the past returned. You cannot afford to do that now, because the past is not resurfacing to trap you. It is resurfacing to complete something, to reveal something that was left unfinished, to show you what you could not see before so that you do not carry its influence forward unknowingly. Here's a difference between moving on and moving forward. Moving on ignores. Moving forward understands. And you are being called into understanding. So do not rush this process. Do not dismiss what is coming up simply because it feels inconvenient or unexpected. Sit with it. Observe it. Let it speak without immediately trying to control what it means. Because within what is being revealed is not just information, it is direction. Direction that will shape how you move from this point forward. Direction that will free you from patterns you did not even realize were connected to these past moments. Direction that will allow you to step into a version of yourself that is no longer influenced by incomplete understanding. The past was never silent, but with waiting for you to become who you were right now. And now that you are here, it is finally being heard. Type "I am ready to understand my past" in the comments if you feel this truth settling within you. Lesson code 4040 is now anchoring clarity into your spirit. There is a reason the past does not just return as memory, but as feeling. A reason it does not simply show you images, but stirs something deep within your chest, something that feels immediate, present, almost as if time collapsed and brought you back into the moment itself. This is what many fail to understand. The past does not hold its power in events alone. It holds it in the emotional imprint those events left behind, and that imprint has been quietly shaping you ever since. Archangel Michael speaks into this with precision because this is where the awakening becomes deeply personal. It is no longer just about what happened. It is about what remained. The emotional echo you feel now is not weakness, and it is not something to suppress. It is evidence. Evidence that something was experienced but not fully resolved, something was felt but not fully understood, something was carried but not consciously released. You may have believed that time healed it. You may have told yourself that you moved on. And in many ways, you did. You continued your life. You built new experiences. You formed new connections. But underneath all of that, the emotional imprint stayed intact, quietly influencing your reactions, your expectations, your boundaries, and even your fears. It became part of your internal framework without you realizing it. This is why certain situations today trigger responses that feel stronger than the moment itself should justify. This is why certain words, tones, or behaviors from others create reactions that seem disproportionate on the surface. It is not about what is happening now alone. It is about what it connects to. The present moment becomes a doorway and the emotional echo moves through it, bringing with it everything that was left unresolved. And this can be confusing, because you may look at your current life and wonder why something so small feels so significant, why something that others might dismiss affects you so deeply, why certain patterns keep repeating, even when you consciously try to change them. But the answer is not in the present moment alone. It is in the emotional residue that has been carried forward, shaping your perception in ways you have not fully seen until now. This is where awareness becomes crucial, because once you begin to recognize the emotional echo for what it is, you stop mislabeling it. You stop calling it overreaction. You stop calling it sensitivity as if it is a flaw. You begin to understand that it is information. It is your internal system pointing towards something that needs to be understood at a deeper level. It is not trying to overwhelm you. It is trying to guide you. Think about how you respond in moments of tension, uncertainty, or vulnerability. Think about the patterns that emerge, the instinct to withdraw, to over-explain, to protect yourself, to anticipate outcomes before they happen. These are not random behaviors. They are adaptations. They were formed in response to past experiences where certain outcomes created emotional impact strong enough to leave a lasting imprint. At the time, those adaptations served a purpose. They helped you navigate situations you did not fully understand. They allowed you to maintain control in moments where clarity was limited. But now, those same adaptations may be limiting you. They may be influencing decisions that no longer align with who you are becoming. They may be keeping you within patterns that were never meant to define your future. And this is why the emotional echo is resurfacing now. Not to keep you bound to the past, but to show you where the past is still influencing you in the present. To reveal the connections between what you experienced and how you respond today. To give you the opportunity to finally see those patterns clearly, so you can choose differently moving forward. This is not about blaming yourself for how you have reacted. It is about understanding why you reacted that way in the first place. It is about separating who you are now from the version of you that had to adapt in order to navigate earlier experiences. And as that separation becomes clear, something powerful begins to happen. You regain choice. You begin to notice the moment before the reaction. You begin to feel the emotional echo without immediately being controlled by it. You begin to question whether the response that once felt automatic is still necessary. And in that space, between awareness and action, you find the ability to respond differently. But this requires honesty, It requires you to acknowledge that the past is not just something that happened. It is something that has been shaping you. And that shaping, while necessary at one point, is now being reevaluated. You are being invited to update your internal framework, to release what no longer serves you, and to integrate understanding in a way that creates alignment rather than reaction. The emotional echo is not your enemy. It is your signal. A signal that something important is being revealed. A signal that you are ready to process what was once too complex to fully understand. A signal that the version of you who experienced those moments is no longer the version of you who has to carry them in the same way. And as you begin to see this clearly, the intensity of the echo will begin to change. Not because it disappears immediately, but because your relationship to it transforms. It no longer controls you. It informs you. It guides you. It becomes part of your awareness rather than a force that moves you without consent. This is how the past releases its hold, not by being ignored, but by being understood. And you are stepping into that understanding now. Type "I understand my emotions" in the comments if this message is aligning with you. Blessing code 5050 is now stabilizing your inner clarity. There is a deeper layer to everything you are experiencing right now, something that goes beyond memory, beyond emotion, beyond simple reflection. This is not just psychological. This is not just personal growth unfolding at random. There is a spiritual timing attached to what is happening, and the timing is precise. Nothing about this resurfacing is accidental, and nothing about it is delayed. It is happening now because now is when it can serve its true purpose. Archangel Michael reveals that truth does not surface when it is convenient. It surfaces when it becomes necessary for your next level. And whether you realize it or not, you are standing at a threshold, a point of transition, a place where the way you have been thinking, reacting, and moving can no longer carry you forward without adjustment. Something greater is trying to unfold in your life, but it requires alignment. And alignment cannot happen while parts of your past remain misunderstood. This is why the truth is returning now. Not earlier, when you might have rejected it. Not later, when it could have caused deeper confusion. But now, at the exact moment when you are capable of receiving it without losing yourself in it. You have grown enough. You have experienced enough. You have developed enough awareness to see beyond the surface of things. And because of that, what once would have overwhelmed you can now be integrated. But here is what makes this moment so critical. Because whenever truth surfaces at a moment of transition, it is not just offering understanding. It is demanding a decision. You are being shown something so that you can move differently. You are being revealed something so that you can choose differently. You are being awakened to something so that you do not repeat what was never meant to follow you into your future. This is the spiritual reason behind the timing. There are paths ahead of you right now. Not just physical paths, but internal ones. Ways of thinking, ways of responding, ways of relating to yourself and others. And without this clarity, you could unknowingly step into patterns that mirror your past rather than reflect your growth. You could recreate dynamics that feel familiar but are no longer aligned. You could make decisions based on incomplete understanding, thinking you are moving forward when in reality you are repeating something unresolved. And this is what is being prevented. Because once truth is revealed, repetition becomes a choice rather than a cycle. And that changes everything. There is also something else happening beneath the surface that you must not overlook. As this truth rises, it is not only bringing clarity, it is disrupting illusions. Illusions you may not have realized you were still holding on to. Ideas about certain people, certain situation, even certain parts of yourself that felt stable because they were never fully questioned. And when those illusions begin to crack, it can feel unsettling. Because illusion creates comfort. Even when it is incomplete, even when it is inaccurate, it gives the mind something to hold on to. It creates a sense of certainty, but that certainty is limited. It cannot support the level of awareness you are stepping into. And so, it must be replaced with something stronger truth. This is why you may feel a sense of tension right now, a pull between what you used to believe and what you are beginning to see, a hesitation between staying in what feels known and stepping into what is becoming clear. This tension is not meant to stop you. It is meant to refine you, because clarity requires courage. It requires you to let go of interpretations that no longer hold up. It requires you to accept that some things were not as they seemed. It requires you to stand in a new understanding even if it changes how you view your past entirely. And this is where many people hesitate. They see the truth, but they do not fully accept it. They recognize the pattern, but they do not break it. They understand what needs to shift, but they delay acting on that understanding. You cannot afford that delay now, because this is not just about what you are realizing. It is about what you are preparing to step into next. There is movement ahead of you, decisions that will shape your direction, opportunities that will require clarity, relationships that will require discernment. And without this deeper understanding, you would approach those moments with the same internal framework that was shaped by incomplete truth. But now that framework is being updated, you are being recalibrated, so that when you move forward, you do so with awareness rather than assumption, with intention rather than reaction, with clarity rather than confusion. This is why the timing is now, because what is ahead of you cannot be entered with who you were before this moment. And the truth that is resurfacing is not here to hold you back. It is here to prepare you, to align you, to position you for what comes next. So do not resist it. Do not delay it. Do not try to control how it unfolds. Let it reveal what it needs to reveal. Because the more fully you receive it now, the more powerfully you will move forward from this point on. And understand this clearly: this is not just reflection. This is preparation. Type "I am ready" for alignment in the comments if you feel this shift happening within you. Lesson code 6060 is now activating your next level of clarity. There is a truth that must be faced now, and it may not be easy to accept at first. Not because it is meant to harm you, but because it challenges something you have relied on for a long time: your understanding of what was real, what was true, and what was accurate in your past. Because the reality is this: part of what you experienced was filtered through deception. Not always intentional, not always obvious, but present enough that it shaped how you saw things and ultimately, how you saw yourself. Archangel Michael brings this forward now with precision, because this is where the awakening deepens. It is one thing to realize that something was misunderstood. It is another thing entirely to realize that something was misrepresented, whether by others, by circumstances, or even by the limitations of your own perception at the time. And that realization can feel unsettling, because it forces you to question what you once accepted without hesitation. Deception does not always look like lies. Sometimes it looks like partial truth. Sometimes it appears as something that feels right in the moment, but lacks the full context needed to understand it accurately. Sometimes it is silence where there should have been clarity. Sometimes it is behavior that was normalized around you, even though it was never aligned with truth. And because it was consistent, because it was familiar, because it was never directly challenged, it became part of your framework. You adapted to it. You built around it. You made sense of your experiences using the information you had available. But what happens when that information was incomplete? What happens when the story you built was missing key pieces? This is where the deception reveals its impact. Because it is not just about what happened in the past. It is about how that version of understanding shaped your decisions moving forward. The way you interpreted certain actions, the way you defined trust, the way you set boundaries, the way you viewed your own role in different situations, all of it was influenced by what you believed to be true at the time. And now, that belief is being challenged. You may begin to see that certain things were not as balanced as you thought, that certain dynamics were not as fair as you assumed, that certain explanations you accepted were not complete. And this is not about placing blame. It is about recognizing influence. Because deception's greatest strength is not in being obvious. It is in being accepted. When something is accepted as normal, it no longer gets questioned. When something is repeated enough, it becomes familiar. And when something becomes familiar, it begins to feel true, even if it is not fully accurate. This is how patterns form. This is how perspectives are shaped. This is how you can live within something for so long without realizing that it was never entirely aligned. And now, that alignment is being restored. But restoration requires exposure. It requires you to look at things without the filters you once had, to examine situations without immediately defaulting to the explanations you were given, to allow yourself to see what was previously overlooked, not with judgment, but with clarity. This is where resistance may rise, because part of you may want to protect the old understanding, not because it is correct, but because it is familiar. There is comfort in believing that everything made sense the way you once understood it. There is stability in holding on to a narrative that feels complete. But if that narrative was built on partial truth, then holding on to it will only limit your ability to move forward with clarity. And this is why the deception must be seen, not to create confusion, but to remove it, not to destabilize you, but to ground you in something real, not to make you question everything endlessly, but to allow you to finally see what was always there, just beyond your awareness. You are not being shown this to feel regret. You are being shown this to reclaim accuracy. Because when you see clearly, you begin to understand how certain beliefs were formed. You begin to recognize which parts of your perspective were influenced rather than chosen. And most importantly, you begin to separate what is truly yours from what was placed upon you. This is where your power returns. Because once deception is exposed, it no longer holds the same influence. It cannot shape your decisions in the same way. It cannot define your reactions without your awareness. It becomes something you can see, something you can understand, something you can choose to move beyond rather than unconsciously operate within. But this requires honesty. It requires you to be willing to see things as they are, not as they were presented to you. It requires you to accept that some parts of your past were not fully clear at the time. And it requires you to trust that seeing the truth now does not weaken you, it strengthens you. Because clarity is not something that takes away from who you are. It is something that refines who you are becoming. And as this deception continues to unravel, you will begin to feel something shift within you. A sense of certainty that was not there before. A sense of grounded understanding that replaces confusion. A sense of awareness that allows you to move forward without carrying distortions from the past. This is not about losing your story. It is about seeing it clearly for the first time. And once you do, everything begins to change. Type ISE through deception in the comments if you are ready to walk in clarity. Blessing code 7070 is now sharpening your discernment. There is something you may not have fully accepted yet, even as everything around you begins to make more sense. You were not just someone who experienced these moments in your past. You were positioned within them. There is a difference, and it is a difference that changes how you understand your entire journey. Because what you went through was not random placement. It was alignment with a role that only you could fulfill, even if you did not recognize it at the time. Archangel Michael reveals this now because this is where understanding transforms into purpose. Up until this point, you have been looking at your past through the lens of experience, what happened, how it affected you, what it meant. But now, you are being asked to look at it through a different lens. Not just as something you lived through, but as something you were positioned within for a reason that extends beyond the moment itself. You were not placed in those situations because you were weak. You were placed there because you would eventually see what others could not. There were patterns around you that went unnoticed by many. There were dynamics that were accepted without question. There were behaviors, beliefs, and cycles that continued simply because no one stopped to examine them deeply. But you were always observing, even when you did not realize it. You were always sensing something beneath the surface, even when you could not fully explain it. That sensitivity, that awareness, that internal questioning, it was not accidental. It was part of the role you carry, and that role is now activating. Because the truth that is resurfacing is not just for your healing. It is for your clarity, your direction, and ultimately, your ability to break what was never meant to continue. You are not here to simply understand your past. You are here to interrupt its repetition. This is where everything begins to shift internally. Because once you realize that you were positioned within certain experiences not just to endure them, but to see through them, your perspective changes. You stop identifying only as the one who went through something, and you begin to recognize yourself as the one who can now bring awareness to it. Not necessarily for others outwardly, but for yourself in a way that prevents those same patterns from continuing through you. This is not a passive role. It requires awareness, yes, but it also requires responsibility. Because once you see clearly, you cannot unknow what you now understand. You cannot return to the same interpretations without recognizing their limitations. You cannot participate in the same patterns without feeling the misalignment. And that is where your role becomes active rather than observational. You become the point where things change. This may feel heavy at first, because with clarity comes the awareness that certain cycles could have continued indefinitely if not recognized. And now that you recognize them, there is a sense of responsibility to move differently. But understand this clearly. You are not being asked to carry everything or fix everything. You are being asked to align yourself with truth in a way that naturally shifts your direction. Your role is not to control others. Your role is to transform your own path. And in doing so, you break the continuation of what you once experienced. There is also something else you must acknowledge. The fact that you are here, understanding this now, means that you were always meant to reach this point. Even in moments where you felt confused, uncertain, or disconnected, there was a process unfolding. A preparation happening beneath the surface. You were developing the awareness needed to recognize what is being revealed now. Nothing you experienced was wasted. Every moment contributed to your ability to see what you are now seeing. And that awareness is not common. Many people remain within patterns without ever questioning them deeply. They continue cycles without realizing they have the ability to step outside of them. But you are not in that position anymore. You are aware. You are seeing connections. You are recognizing influences. And because of that, you are in a position to move differently. This is your role. to see clearly, to understand deeply, to choose intentionally. And as you step into this role, something shifts within you. A sense of direction begins to form, not based on external pressure, but on internal clarity. You begin to feel less reactive and more intentional, less uncertain and more grounded, less influenced by what once shaped you, and more aligned with what you now understand. But this requires consistency. It requires you to continue observing, continue questioning, continue aligning with what you know is true rather than what feels familiar. Because familiarity will try to pull you back into old patterns, even after you have recognized them. That is part of the process. But awareness gives you the ability to choose differently each time. And each time you choose differently, you reinforce your role. You solidify the shift. You move further away from repetition and closer to alignment. This is not something that happens all at once. It is something that unfolds through conscious choice. But now, you are equipped for it. And now you are aware of it. Now, you are stepping into it. And as you do, you will begin to see that your past was not just something you had to get through. It was something that prepared you to become exactly who you are right now. Someone who sees. Someone who understands. Someone who chooses differently. Type "I step into my role" in the comments if you are ready to move with purpose. Blessing code 8080 is now activating alignment within your path. As you step into this role, understand that your awakening is not meant to stay contained. It is meant to ripple outward and reach others who are still searching for clarity. Every time you support this mission through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description, you are not just giving support. You are releasing seeds into a spiritual harvest that is already forming. The word speaks. Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. And this is your moment to sow with intention, knowing that what you release now becomes light in someone else's darkness. I feel this strongly. This is not just generosity. This is alignment with a divine assignment. When you act, you participate in something greater than yourself, something that multiplies far beyond what you can see. So step forward with confidence, give with purpose, and allow your action to become part of the very breakthrough that is unfolding in your life and in the lives of others. There comes a moment in every transformation where understanding is no longer enough. A moment where clarity, no matter how powerful, demands something deeper from you. That moment is not comfortable. It is not passive. It is not something you can observe from a distance. It is the moment where everything that has been revealed must now be faced directly. And this is that moment for you. Archangel Michael makes this unmistakably clear, because this is the point where awareness turns into confrontation. Not confrontation with others, not outward conflict, but an internal reckoning with what had been buried, avoided, or left unresolved. You have seen the patterns. You have recognized the emotional echoes. You have uncovered the deception. But now, you are being called to stand in front of it fully, without minimizing it, without reshaping it to feel more comfortable, without turning away. This is the breaking point. Not a point of collapse, but a point of decision. Because everything you have uncovered up to now has been leading you here, to the place where you must decide whether you will continue to carry what no longer aligns with you, or whether you will release it completely. And release does not happen through understanding alone. It happens through confrontation. There are parts of your past that were easier to leave undefined. Parts that you labeled quickly so you could move forward without lingering in them. Parts that you softened, reframed, or justified because the full weight of them felt too much to hold at the time. And that was necessary then. But now, those same parts are returning, not to overwhelm you, but to be seen in their entirety. and seeing them fully changes everything. Because when something is fully seen, it can no longer exist in distortion. It can no longer influence you from the shadows. It becomes clear, defined, understood. And once that happens, you are no longer reacting to it unconsciously. You are choosing how it fits, or does not fit, into who you are now. But this requires honesty at a level you may not have accessed before. It requires you to admit what something truly was, not what you hoped it was. It requires you to acknowledge how it truly affected you, not how you convinced yourself it didn't. It requires you to recognize where you adapted in ways that were necessary then, but limiting now. And this level of honesty can feel intense because it strips away the protective layers you built to move forward. Those layers kept you safe, but they also kept parts of the truth hidden. And now, they are no longer needed. This is why the breaking point feels like pressure. Because what is being released is not just information. It is attachment. Attachment to old interpretations. Attachment to outdated identities. Attachment to narratives that no longer hold up under the clarity you now have. And releasing those attachments can feel like losing something, even when what you are losing is limitation. You may feel resistance here, a pull to soften what you now see clearly, a temptation to return to familiar interpretations because they feel easier to hold, a hesitation to fully accept what has been revealed because it changes how you understand everything that followed. But understand this clearly. Avoiding this confrontation does not preserve your peace. It delays your freedom. Because what remains unaddressed does not disappear. It continues to influence. And influence, when unconscious, becomes pattern. This is why this moment cannot be skipped. You are being asked to stand still and face what has surfaced, not with fear, not with judgment, but with clarity. To allow yourself to fully process what is now visible, to feel what needs to be felt without suppressing it or rushing past it, to let the truth settle completely, even if it takes time. Because once it settles, something shifts. The weight you carried without understanding begins to lift. The reactions that once felt automatic begin to loosen. The patterns that once felt inevitable begin to break. Not because you forced them to, but because you removed the unseen force that sustained them. This is the power of confrontation. It does not destroy you. It releases you. And as this release begins, you will notice something subtle but significant. A sense of space where there was once deadness. A sense of clarity where there was once confusion. A sense of control where there was once reaction. These are not small changes. They are the direct result of facing what was buried and allowing it to be understood fully. But do not rush this process. The breaking point is not a single moment. It is a transition. A space where old understanding dissolves and new clarity stabilizes. And the more present you are within it, the more complete the release becomes. You are not here to carry the past forward unchanged. You are here to transform your relationship with it. To take what was once unresolved and bring it into clarity. To take what once influenced you unconsciously and bring it into awareness. To take what once shaped you without your choice and redefine it through understanding. This is where your power solidifies. Not in avoiding what was difficult, but in facing it fully and choosing what remains. And as you move through this breaking point, you will begin to realize something important. You are no longer who you were when these things first happened. You are someone who can see them clearly. Someone who can understand them fully. Someone who can release what no longer belongs. And that is where true transformation begins. Type "I release what no longer serves me" in the comments if you are stepping through this moment. Blessing code 9090 is now anchoring your release and renewal. There is a quiet but undeniable shift happening within you now, and it is not something external. It is not something you need to chase, earn, or wait for. It is something that has already begun the moment you chose to see clearly. Because once truth is recognized, once patterns are understood, once deception is exposed and confronted, something returns to you that was never truly lost, only buried beneath misunderstanding. That something's your power. Archangel Michael reveals that this stage is not about discovering who you are for the first time. It is about reclaiming who you have always been beneath everything that shaped you. Because your identity was never meant to be defined by incomplete interpretations of your past. It was never meant to be limited by the roles you adapted into or the perceptions you inherited. Those were layers, not your core. And now, those layers are falling away. You may begin to notice that the way you see yourself is changing. Subtly at first. You no longer automatically accept certain thoughts about who you are. You begin to question internal narratives that once felt unquestionable. You start to realize that some of the labels you carried were not fully accurate, that some of the limitations you believe in were not truly yours to begin with. This is not confusion. This is recalibration. Because identity, when built on partial truth, can feel stable but remain incomplete. And as the truth about your past becomes clearer, the identity built around that past must also evolve. You cannot continue to see yourself through the same lens once that lens hath been revealed as limited. And this is where the shift in power begins. Power is not something external that you gain. It is something internal that you recognize. It is the moment you realize that you are no longer defined by what happened, but by how you understand it. That your past does not dictate your identity, it informs your awareness. That the patterns you once followed unconsciously are now visible, and therefore no longer automatic. That the reactions you once had without choice are now something you can observe, evaluate, and change. This awareness changes your position entirely. You are no longer inside the pattern. You are looking at it. And from that position, you have choice. This is where many people hesitate, even after gaining clarity. Because reclaiming your identity requires letting go of familiar versions of yourself. Versions that may have been shaped by survival, by adaptation, by fitting into environments that required you to be a certain way. And even if those versions were limiting, they were known. They were practiced. They were predictable. But who you are becoming is different. It requires you to step into a version of yourself that is not shaped by reaction, but by intention. Not guided by past interpretations, but by present clarity. And that can feel unfamiliar at first. Not because it is wrong, but because it is new. This is where trust becomes essential. You must trust what you are seeing. You must trust the clarity that is forming within you. You must trust that the identity emerging now is not something you are forcing, but something that is naturally revealing itself as everything falls away. There is also something important happening in how you relate to others. As your identity shifts, your boundaries begin to adjust. Not aggressively, not forcefully, but naturally. You start to recognize what aligns with you and what does not. You feel less compelled to explain yourself in situations where you once would have overextended. You notice that certain dynamics no longer feel comfortable. Not because something is wrong, but because you are no longer the same version of yourself that once accepted them without question. This is not separation for the sake of distance. This is alignment for the sake of clarity. And with that alignment comes a sense of steadiness, a grounded understanding of who you are that does not fluctuate based on external validation or past influence. A sense of self that is not reactive but rooted. And this steadiness is where your power stabilizes. because power without clarity is unstable, but power grounded in understanding is unshakable. You are no longer navigating your life based on incomplete information. You are no longer interpreting your experiences through outdated perspectives. You are no longer carrying identities that were shaped by what you did not fully see. You are seeing now, and that changes how you move. You begin to make decisions with awareness rather than habit. You begin to respond with intention rather than reaction. You begin to choose paths that reflect your clarity rather than repeat your past. This is the shift. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. But it is undeniable. And as it continues, you will begin to feel something that may have been unfamiliar before. Certainty. Not certainty based on rigid belief, but certainty grounded in understanding. A quiet confidence that does not need to prove itself because it is built on clarity rather than assumption. This is what it means to reclaim your identity. Not to become someone new, but to return to who you are without distortion. And once that return begins, everything you do from this point forward carries a different energy, a different intention, a different level of awareness that cannot be undone. Because once you see yourself clearly, you cannot go back to seeing yourself any other way. Type "I reclaim my identity" in the comments if you feel this shift within you. Blessing Code 1011 is now strengthening your clarity and self-alignment. Now that you have seen what was hidden, now that you have understood what was once unclear, now that you have confronted what was buried and reclaimed what was always yours, you are standing at the edge of something new. Not something distant, not something unheard, but something immediate. The path forward is no longer something you have to search for. It is something that is already forming beneath your feet, shaped by the clarity you now carry. Archangel Michael reveals that this stage is not about waiting for direction. It is about moving with what has already been revealed. Because clarity, when fully received, does not leave you uncertain. It gives you a sense of knowing, a quiet but firm awareness of what aligns and what does not, and that awareness becomes your guide. But here is where many hesitate. They wait for confirmation beyond what they already know. They look for external validation to support what has already become clear internally. They delay action, thinking that more time will somehow make the next step easier or more obvious. But the truth is this: the clarity you have now is already sufficient for your next step. You are not meant to see the entire path at once. You are meant to move with what you know now. This is where authority begins to take form within you. Authority is not about control. It is not about forcing outcomes or dominating situations. It is about alignment with truth, to the point where your actions naturally reflect it. When you move with clarity, you no longer second-guess every decision. You no longer feel the need to justify your direction to yourself or to others. You begin to trust the internal alignment that has been established through everything you have just understood. And this trust changes how you move. You begin to choose differently, not in reaction to fear, not in response to old patterns, but from a place of awareness that is grounded and steady. Decisions that once felt complicated now feel simple, not because the situations themselves have changed, but because your perspective has. You see more clearly now, and because you see clearly, you move clearly. There is also a shift in how you handle uncertainty. Before, uncertainty may have felt like something to avoid, something that created hesitation or doubt. But now, uncertainty no longer holds the same weight. Because even when the outcome is not fully visible, your alignment remains intact. You trust that as long as you move with clarity in the present, the next step will reveal itself when needed. This is what it means to move with authority. Not knowing everything in advance, but trusting what you know in the moment. There will still be moments where old patterns attempt to resurface. Moments where familiar reactions try to re-enter. Situations that resemble what you have already recognized and understood. But the difference now is that you will see them. And seeing them changes everything. Because once you recognize a pattern, it no longer has the same power to pull you in unconsciously. You may feel the initial instinct, but you also feel the awareness alongside it. And in that space, you have choice. This is where your movement becomes intentional. You are no longer carried by patterns. You are directing your path. And this direction does not require force. It requires consistency. Consistency in choosing alignment over familiarity. Consistency in trusting clarity over doubt. Consistency in moving forward even when the step feels small, as long as it is true. This is how the path unfolds. Not all at once, but step by step, each decision reinforcing the clarity you now hold. Here is also something important to understand about this stage. Moving forward does not mean rejecting your past. It means integrating it correctly. Everything you have seen, everything you have understood, everything you have confronted, it all becomes part of your awareness, not something that controls you, but something that informs you. You carry the understanding, not the weight. You carry the clarity, not the confusion. And that distinction is what allows you to move freely. Because you are no longer trying to escape your past. You are moving forward with full awareness of it. And awareness removes repetition. It removes unconscious cycles. It removes the need to revisit the same lessons in the same way. This is where your movement becomes different. Not faster, not louder, but more precise, more aligned, more intentional. And as you continue forward, you will begin to notice that your path feels less forced and more natural, less reactive and more directed. Less influenced by external noise and more guided by internal clarity. This is not something temporary. This is a new way of moving. A way that is grounded in everything you have just awakened to. A way that reflects the truth you now carry. And once you begin moving like this, you do not go back. Because clarity, once integrated, becomes part of how you exist. You are no longer searching for direction. You are walking in it. Type "I move with clarity and authority" in the comments if you are ready to step forward with confidence. Blessing code 1112 is now guiding your path ahead. There is one final truth that must be spoken now, and it carries both weight and urgency. Not fear, not pressure, but clarity in its most direct form. Because everything you have been shown, everything you have understood, everything that has surfaced within you was not revealed without purpose. It was not meant to pass through you like a moment of awareness that fades with time. It was meant to transform how you move from this point forward. Archangel Michael steps forward here not just as a guide, but as a voice of final alignment. Because what happens next depends on what you do with what you now know. There are always two paths at a moment like this. One is the path of integration. The other is the path of avoidance. And the difference between them will define what unfolds in your life from here. If you choose integration, everything you have seen begins to anchor within you. The clarity stabilizes. The patterns you recognized lose their influence. The emotional echoes soften because they are no longer misunderstood. Your identity continues to strengthen, and your movement forward becomes more aligned, more intentional, more grounded. You step into a version of yourself that is no longer shaped by incomplete understanding, but by truth that has been fully received. But if you choose avoidance, if you allow this moment to pass without fully accepting what has been revealed, then something else happens. The patterns do not disappear. They wait. The emotional echoes do not fade. They resurface. The clarity you touch does not anchor. It slips back into the background, and slowly, without immediate notice, you find yourself stepping back into familiar cycles. Not because you are unaware, but because you chose not to act on what you became aware of. And this is where many lose their moment. Not because they were never shown the truth, but because they hesitated to fully receive it. This is the warning, not of danger, but of delay. Because delay creates repetition, and repetition keeps you in cycles that were already meant to end. You are not being asked to be perfect. You are not being asked to have everything figured out immediately. You are being asked to remain aligned with what you now see, and not dismiss it when it becomes inconvenient. Do not shrink from it when it challenges what is familiar. Do not forget it when life becomes busy again. Because truth, once revealed, carries responsibility. Not a burden, but a responsibility to live in alignment with it. And here is the blessing. Because this moment is not only about what could happen if ignored. It is about what becomes possible when it is embraced. When you fully accept what has been revealed, something powerful locks into place within you. A level of clarity that does not fade easily. A sense of direction that does not depend on constant reassurance. A grounded understanding of yourself that does not shift based on external influence. You begin to move differently in ways that feel natural, not forced. You begin to choose differently without overthinking every decision. You begin to trust yourself in a way that was not fully accessible before. And this trust becomes your foundation. From this foundation, everything changes. Your relationships reflect your clarity. Your decisions reflect your awareness. Your path reflects your alignment. And the cycles that once repeated stop. Not because you fought them endlessly, but because you no longer participate in them unconsciously. This is the blessing of alignment. It simplifies what once felt complicated. It stabilizes what once felt uncertain. It strengthens what once felt inconsistent. And it does all of this quietly, steadily, without needing to announce itself. But it begins with one thing: your decision. Right now. Do not let this moment pass. Do not reduce what you have understood into something temporary. Do not return to old interpretations simply because they are familiar. You are at a point where your awareness has expanded beyond where it was before. And once expanded, it cannot contract without consequence. So choose alignment. Choose clarity. Choose to move forward with what you now know. Because this moment will not present itself in the same way again. And what you do with it now will shape everything that follows. You are not the same person who started this journey. You see more. You understand more. You are more. And now, it is time to live accordingly. Type "I walk in truth" in the comments if you are choosing alignment today. Blessing code 1212 is now sealing clarity, protection, and forward movement over your path. As you stand in this final moment of clarity, understand this: what has been unlocked in you is meant to flow outward and reach others who are still searching in the dark. Every seed you sow into this mission becomes a light ignited in another soul, a ripple of truth that heaven multiplies beyond what your eyes can see. The word declares, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and right now. This is your moment to act in faith, not hesitation. I speak this as a living invitation. I choose to sow into this message because I know it carries life beyond me. When you give through Super Thanks with the PayPal link in the description, you are not supporting a channel. You are fueling a divine assignment, opening pathways for truth to reach those who are ready, but have not yet heard. This is a prophetic act, and your obedience carries weight in the spirit. Release your seed now, step into alignment, and watch how heaven responds with provision, clarity, and multiplied blessings over your life.